Well, we have some breaking news to report tonight, Sean. President Biden is creating a commission to study reforms to the Supreme Court. You know, at least one of the members being tapped for that commission has hinted that she's supportive of court expansion. You know, we've been talking about where President Biden stands on court packing for a long time. He never gave us a full answer when he was running for president. He said, once I'm president, maybe you'll find out. But he always...
He actually said, once I'm elected, once the election's
that's right.
over.
Good point.
Yeah, not even I have to win.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that is heard.
I looked this up today. It was October 8th at a campaign event in Arizona. And he said, you know, after the election... No one's asked the White House press office in one of these press briefings. I mean, that might be something to ask.
That'd be a great question.
Yeah, you know, I know that they're busy, though. They've had to figure out what flavor ice cream he likes, also what color the Air Force One plane design is going to be. These are the big things, not whether or not we're going to change the Supreme Court. That's a minor issue. We'll get to it after the important stuff. But this commission, I think, is just a ruse. This is their way of getting it done and saying that, like, hey, we looked at it and we studied it, but the reality is, it's going to happen. This is a massive consequence of this election.
Yeah, and he said that he was going to do this commission. There's 15 people on it. It is bipartisan, but it's more liberal than bipartisan. So we'll see what happens with it. It'll be interesting. We'll be updating you on that as we know more. But, you know, Sean, something else that is very important that we wanted to mention today is that it is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, where we remember the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And, you know, it's so important to take time to commemorate all those lives that were lost and the survivors who are still with us as well. But shifting gears a little bit, today also marks President Biden's first full week in office since inauguration, which was last Wednesday.
Yeah, and he's already breaking records, but I'm not sure that these are the records that you necessarily want to break. He has now signed more executive orders and actions in his first week than any president. Take a look at the scorecard we put together for you. If you count the executive orders listed on the official White House website, President Biden has signed 24 executive orders. 9 were actually on his first day, and 38 executive actions and counting. And Lyndsay, it's funny. I've worked in the White House. I worked multiple years on Capitol Hill, and it's interesting. I've never really stepped that back and thought about the difference between the two, and I think it's important to explain the difference between an executive order and executive action. And legally, though, and as I have always noted, I'm not a lawyer, but according to at least the American Bar Association, they are different. Executive orders are published in the Federal Register, which is published daily by the National Archives and Records Administration. You can go online and check out everything that the government has been doing, and are legally binding. Contrast that to the executive actions, and they actually seem to bear little weight. They're not published in the register and aren't really subject to legal review. So at least my interpretation, my non-legal interpretation, they're more of a PR stunt and a way of formally saying this is what I think.
Yeah, which is interesting because they are different, and it's important to explain that to everyone because, you know, if you listen to the media, they kind of just interchange those words back and forth, and you wouldn't know that there is a difference, and they mention them as the same thing. But speaking of the media, you know, they were extremely hard on President Biden. We've talked about that often. Trump. Thank you.
I was like, yeah, they haven't been hard on.
Opposite. Thank you.
Caught that one.
You did catch that one on President Trump, but not to Biden. But they called President Trump this week a dictator. They compared him to that. You know, but he didn't sign nearly as many number of executive orders the first 100 days that he was president as Biden has already signed. You know, he's been using his power pretty egregiously. It's not acting, you know, showing this unity that he keeps talking about because he's just using his power that he has so strongly.
I'm getting a little tired of this word unity. It's just, it's like you have to say it. Like we have unity. We're trying for it's proven already in a weekend. We're not. This is a talking point at best. You know, it's. Anyway, we have so much more to get to, so let's. I'm tired of talking about faux unity because the Senate Commerce Committee voted today 21-3, which is pretty close to unanimous, to approve Mayor Pete Buttigieg's nomination to be the next Secretary of Transportation. It obviously now heads to the Senate floor. Well, if that vote is any indication, it's, you know, probably likely that later this week he will be confirmed. Now, interestingly to note, the Senate has so far confirmed all of Biden's pick, and I think done so pretty quickly. But want to go back to something we have brought up before. What qualifications does Mayor Pete have? He was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which is cute. It's got some buses, I think. But that's not exactly the experience that this position that oversees the highways, the air systems, the intermodal transportation systems, the buses, the metros and transit. I mean, this is a big deal. It's a big chunk of the economy.
Yeah, and we saw how important that was during COVID because a lot of that was, closed down. We talked to Elaine Chao about that. And I think this was a concern people had when he ran against Biden for president. He has just been mayor of, 8 years. That's not a lot of time, and that's all he's done.
A small place, too.
Small place. But if you compare that back in 2017, Elaine Chao was confirmed to the same position by almost a unanimous vote of 93-6. But she had already been the Secretary of Labor for 8 years in George W. Bush's administration. So her qualifications were well documented when she was confirmed at the time.
Yeah, and she had been Deputy Secretary of Transportation for George H.W. Bush. She was chair of the Federal Maritime Commission. She had served on the Maritime Commission. I mean, so she had serious credentials. But another one of President Biden's cabinet picks made some news as well. It's the Democratic governor of my home state, Rhode Island. Gina Raimondo, the current governor there, was the nominee for Secretary of Commerce. And she said yesterday through this virtual hearing that she would take a strong stance on China. But when she was asked about keeping the communications company that we've talked about, Huawei, which is a tool of the communist Chinese government, on the U.S. entities blacklist, she avoided answering the question. Now, clearly that was something that the Biden administration had said, please don't comment on it, which I don't get. That is something that should be bipartisan. We should all agree, Huawei bad. Huawei, national security threat to the United States. I don't know why that was punted.
Yeah, that's a great question because we've talked about how this should be bipartisan. We've talked about this, China commission that was created in Congress that no one on the left would be a part of. But I think that that was a political stunt during a political year, during a campaign. Now people should realize that China is a real threat to us. It's a long-term threat, and you'd hope they could get on board to that.
Yeah. Also, another thing that we've talked about, predicted, but they're already talking about this. Democrats now are putting a plan together led by Tom Carper, a senator from Delaware. 36 fellow Democrats have introduced a bill to make Washington, D.C., you guessed it, the 51st state. It's been a long time coming. It hasn't succeeded so far, but now they've got the votes in the Senate. They've got the votes in the House. My guess, Puerto Rico is next. That's 2 new senators, the District of Columbia, guaranteed Democrats, probably 2 more on the House side. I mean, for Puerto Rico, if that comes. That's a permanent Democratic majority for at least a generation.
Yeah, and Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C., she told Biden she wanted that to be on his first 100 days. So we'll see if it happens. They have control of everything now, so they can make these decisions. But we got to bring this up too, Sean. Baseball great and friend of the show, Curt Schilling, was yet again not elected for the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is the 9th time he's been passed over.
Yeah, I mean, and look at his little. We'll put up like his baseball card of stats: 3,116 strikeouts, a 3-time Cy Young runner-up, 11-2, 2.223 ERA in the postseason, 3-time World Series champion, bloody sock from the Red Sox, 2001 World Series MVP. By the way, they've got his sock in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But with this level of success, it's a no-brainer for the Hall of Fame. And yet he came up short of the 75 votes needed not because of his baseball skills, but because of his support for right-leaning causes, for President Trump. It's ridiculous. He's saying, I don't want to go up for a 10th. I don't want to do this. I texted with Curt today. We're going to get him on the show later this week. But it's insane that now we've allowed baseball to be taken over by a bunch of woke baseball reporters who get to choose who's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it should be on the skills that you clearly presented that he has, not on your personal life that's, your political standing, essentially.
Yeah.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.